example, that was really a significant focus on retention rates and access. And setting goals and rewarding people who met those goals and relentlessly forcing us to change to meet those goals. So it's the seriousness, not just in words, but in the investments that you're making and the opportunities you're creating for people, and recognizing that the institution is shifting, come along for the ride.
I have a quick question here. First of all, the last part of the charter is very powerful. It's the first time I've seen something like that from an educational institution.
Right.
Even other organizations struggle with working with that. So how do you measure success for that part? How do you ensure the community, stakeholders, especially the school, is communicating and maintaining the health of the constituents?
I think all of my colleagues can weigh in here, and I think each of them is going to speak to a slice of what that looks like. So in these areas, we are not setting targets for, how much did we advance on the economic piece as a number target. But we're looking at the collective activities of the enterprise across the zones, across local investments in engagement with community partners and our social embeddedness activities. So it's sort of saying, as a collective institution across all of our activities, are we paying attention to these kinds of things? So we're not really chasing specific targets with one leader that's responsible for delivering it, but this is more that mindset that says across all of our activities, are we tending to these things? And that they get measured within the bucket in which that activity lives. That way it makes it more real. Because if you had like one VP for cultural health, and that VP builds an organization, and that person then leaves, so something happens, and all of a sudden we don't do anything cultural, right? Instead, the idea is it's woven across all of the work that we do.
And I would also add to that, when we look, we have 200,000 students, 194,000 students, right? What if there was no place for them to have jobs in Greater Phoenix afterwards? So we have to set up the ecosystem so that there's places, nice places for them to live, grow a family, have the right jobs to support them so they want to stay in Arizona afterwards and not want to maybe come here and then go find jobs elsewhere.
So we're gonna talk about affordable housing at some point.
Right.
Maybe not today, but
Good
another
point.
time.
Yes, please.
I'm curious how it's changing hiring. Like, does that charter help people self-select out? Like, are there other, university professors or anyone at the executive level that try to get a job here and you very quickly say, that charter is our charter, and they self-select out, saying, that's not me?
What we're seeing is a lot of people self-selecting in. But it also means that hiring is a little different at this institution, because we have people in roles and positions that usually don't exist at other institutions. I think, Laura, you're a good example of a position that exists here because of a particular commitment, right? So it's a fantastic, I wouldn't say tool, but the ideals allow for a lot of selecting in.
Yeah.
But it also allows us to hire and maintain roles that we don't typically see in other institutions because of that enterprise mindset, right? We're trying to do different kinds of things. So yes, we have a lot of professors and we have a lot of staff who look like traditional employees at universities, and then we have a whole bunch of people who you typically wouldn't see in an institution like a university, but they exist here because of what we're trying to do.
Okay, one more and then we'll.
I remember about 2 decades ago, it was about 50,000 students, it was big then. I went to ASU, so we started probably about the same time, and then about a decade ago, it seems like you hit that 100,000 mark, and now 200,000, we see the campuses sprawling. There's so much going on in ASU 6 everywhere, now leading in innovation. So what were the setbacks? Because I think from outside, it just seems like this rocket ship trajectory, but what were the setbacks and lessons learned along the way?
So the interesting thing about setbacks is because of design build, you don't really we never try to launch like one humongous thing that then either failed or succeeded, right? So the setbacks were things that we learned along the way. So it took us a couple of tries before we got ASU Online, the model fully right. But because we didn't launch it with a big big bang with tons of investment, those setbacks didn't hurt us. They were just learning moments, right? So if you're doing just enough in the design, then there are a lot of setbacks. So lots of experimental things. So I used to run our MBA programs for 7 years, many years ago. We attempted a weekend MBA program, right? We thought this might be a good thing to bring in people from the local region, except that we ran into the headwinds of the recession. So we launched it, 2 years later, we had to shut it down. Okay, that was a setback, yes, but we learned some important things, right? So there have been a lot of these things that we try and learn and pivot and move so that they don't look like colossal failures that impact the institution, but there are enough of these things that we are testing along the way. So setbacks always if you're trying to be innovative, but they're not things that sort of help, cause the institution to collapse.
And the charter as is makes it a safe place for you to try those new things, new ventures, the weekend MBA program. You tried making more people being accessible on weekends. Didn't work, but it's okay because now it's the next chance to try the next thing to make it more inclusive and greater access. So it's really a place where if there's a new idea, we lean on the charter and say, well, let's try it. It's gonna help, the overall health, it's gonna help advance research, and if it doesn't work, we'll try the next thing.
Yeah, one more question, but it seems like that whole, when you tie into innovation, this experimentation culture, we're not gonna learn anything if we don't try it, and some things will succeed, so, that's part of a truly innovative university, correct?
Yeah.
That's great to see. One more question, then we'll move on. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for allowing it. I'm relatively new to the area. This is my first deep exposure to ASU. Phenomenally interesting and uplifting what you shared. Particularly caught with the idea that you started with the charter and showed such uniform commitment to that. Very, very impressive. But my question, you should be probably the best person to answer because it is economic. Being the #1 university in America in terms of student size, et cetera, can you share with us what percentage of your student body is online versus on site? And secondly, how has the economic model that you built here allowed you to do so many innovative enterprise level activities which other wealthy universities have not been able to do?
Let me take your student question first. So about 70,000 students are on campus, many of our campuses in the metro area, and the rest of the students are online. Online doesn't mean that they are from Arizona. It just means that that's a modality that they're choosing to get their degree because they're otherwise occupied or, as a rule, our online students are slightly older. They're all working professionals, so that's an ease of getting the degree. So online students can be from anywhere. So there is that piece of it. But in terms of the economic model, in some ways we were forced to become entrepreneurial in our orientation. We are Arizona State University, but less than 10% of our operating budget comes from the state. So there was a moment where we had to say, either we figure out how to resource the things that we want to do, or we contain ourselves to what was possible through existing state funding. We decided we were going to be entrepreneurial. And so we have grown our foundation and the endowment of the institution. We, bless you. We grow through partnerships, and Laura will talk about one of those partnerships. So we have found every avenue to raise the resources we need to be able to do the things that we want to do in the service of our community and the charter. So in some sense, what felt like originally pressure of inadequate investment from the state turned out to now be a fantastic thing. And the state has continued to invest, and we just had a $50 million investment in our health building downtown. We have had a philanthropist who just invested over $100 million in helping our new medical school. So it's building that community of people and organizations who see us pursuing this mission. They are energized and excited. They want to be a part of it. But that is very much what makes us innovative.
That was a perfect segue to go over to Laura. Laura, if you can just give us a little bit on what you're focused on and maybe a little bit more on the Starbucks College Achievement Plan, that would be great.
Yes, happy to, and it is a perfect segue, Manu, because so much of who we are at ASU with our charter and the way that we organize internally not only attracts people who want to work at ASU, but it also, to an external audience, attracts people who want to work with ASU. And we tend to attract a lot of like-minded business leaders or community members that raise their hand and say, hey, I think what you're doing here is really interesting. I'd like to have a conversation about what we might imagine together. And I lead the relationship that we have with Starbucks. We have a number of different Starbucks initiatives, but I'd love to talk today about the Starbucks College Achievement Plan, which is considered a gold standard in higher education partnerships between higher ed and industry, and how much we can advance when we share a common goal. And like so many of President Crow's relationships, when he meets someone that's really interesting and has shared ideals, the relationship can move very quickly in terms of big picture thinking. If you've ever met him, he thinks up here. And he and Howard Schultz, who's the founder of Starbucks and chairman emeritus, were on a board together called the Markle Economic Forum Initiative. And really it was focusing on the future of people, the future of work, and workforce advancement. And so as they get to talking, they realize they have common backgrounds. Both would describe their backgrounds as coming from a lower economic class, where the likelihood of them getting to where they are today was very small. They were able to overcome many odds, complete their degrees, and become successful in their areas of business and in higher ed. But they realized that it's a challenge, and higher ed was getting more expensive. There's this view that there were a lot of barriers, and keep in mind this was over 10 years ago. And so Howard Schultz, in leading Starbucks, said, we are often viewed as being forward thinkers in a frontline retail worker space in terms of our benefits. They provided healthcare coverage to partners, and that's their word for their employees, they call them partners. They provide healthcare coverage for part-time and full-time partners. They get bean stock, so if you work at Starbucks, you get stock in the company. That's cool. And so that mindset of you can't develop a successful business if you also don't invest in the people was core to Howard's mission. You can already see some alignment in how President Crow was thinking about ASU and the university, this concept of access and impact, and how do we do more to serve our communities. So they came up with this idea of the Starbucks College Achievement Plan. What would it look like if a company in higher ed invested in employees not just as a perk, but as a pathway to opportunity? And I think that the story of how this came to be, the fact that this really is social impact focused at its core, is what made it different then and still makes it different now. And for two really big reasons. One, employees were able to choose whatever degree program they were interested in. That's almost unheard of today. Typically, a company will say, we'd be happy to pay for your bachelor's degree, but it has to pipeline into something that is going to be available to you here, which is wonderful. That is certainly a pathway that works. With the frontline retail workforce, where Howard really saw opportunity was, I understand you might not want to stay your entire life working at Starbucks as a barista. In our corporate roles, they have about 2,000 positions available. It's not realistic for a workforce of 200,000 people to all move into this tiny slice of the corporate space. And if our goal is to expand access to opportunity and to increase their socioeconomic mobility, let's give them the opportunity to choose whatever degree program they're passionate about. If you're a barista and you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be a teacher, we will pay for you to do that. We're happy to let our managers know you don't have an intention to stay here. You've got other ambitions, but we're going to help you reach that goal. That is really unusual. The other piece that's very different is the fact that they don't require them to stay at Starbucks at graduation for any time of service after they complete. So there's not this concept that you have to pay off your time because they invested in you. If you want to leave on graduation day and you got a job, they applaud that. They're happy for you, they support that, and that is something that makes the program at its core really different. Since this group likes to think a lot about innovation and how you get from A to B, I will take a moment to pause and say, if you heard of the SCAP program when it first launched, there were a lot of skeptics. There are a lot of people that said, what are you doing? This is gonna ruin ASU Online's program, it's gonna become Starbucks University. This isn't going to be accessible to the students that really need it. You really need to focus on this group or this group. But President Crow and Howard were really set in their beliefs that this is what we need right now in this moment. And they're willing to test it and they're willing to try it. I think if we were to try to replicate something like this today, or another company wanted to replicate something like this today, you have to have that leadership buy-in. You have to have leaders that are comfortable taking a risk because they truly believe in something and rallying the team to accomplish those goals. Ron Crawford, who led benefits at Starbucks, often shares a story that he remembers when Howard came back from meeting President Crow and shared, here's what we talked about and here's what we think we want to do. And he said, you want to do what? How are we going to make that happen? How are we going to afford that? What's the investment going to look like? And no one really knew what the uptick was going to be. We didn't know how many students were going to apply or what the bill was going to be at the end of the year, but we knew it was the right thing to do and we wanted to try something different. You fast forward 12 years later, we've graduated 18,000 SCAP members through ASU. 18,000. So much success, and we're gonna celebrate in May another 1,000 graduates from ASU. About 200 to 300 of them come to campus every graduation season. And Starbucks offers this really beautiful moment where we invite the graduates to a spot on campus. Their CEO, Brian Nickel, will share a few words. President Crow always speaks to the grads. But then we open up the floor and we let them share their stories of impact and what this program meant to them. And I always tell first-timers, you've all been to this event, bring a tissue because the stories are so impactful. And we're not only hearing from partners who have participated in this, we hear from their family members too. And I think that's so important to touch on because it hits the community aspect of our charter. If you are someone who in your family did not think of yourself as college-going material, or you saw so many barriers to access, and suddenly you have this door open for you, and you're willing to put in the work, I always say, we open the door to opportunity, but it is the student who has to do the work. And to be a working learner is not easy. Many times these partners are non-traditional students, so they're trying to balance their work at Starbucks, they're trying to get in as many classes as they can, sometimes they have family members at home. This is a huge commitment, and if you're chipping away at your degree program, this can take 3, 4, or 5 years, so it's a lot of determination. And when they finally get to that moment, they see such a increase in their self-confidence, in their abilities. Their family members see that in them. Their brothers and sisters see them accomplishing this big goal. Their stores celebrate them. We've had so many partners say, the customers at my store knew I was pursuing my degree program, and they have been cheering me on along the way. We've even had some community members that will throw little parties for the graduates when it's their graduation week before they come to Arizona. And so I love how it becomes a community event, but then those graduates stay in the community and help make it a better place to be. They're more engaged, they're inspiring other learners. We've even found that if a Starbucks store has at least one partner participating in the program, which 90% of Starbucks stores in the US have at least one ASU student in them, they're more likely to have 2, 3, 4, 5, because once someone gets started on this journey, changing their trajectory, it's a contagious energy. It's hard work, but it's a contagious energy. So I do like to think about the fact that it is a force multiplier of change, and it is a way that ASU appears at a national stage. If you go to a Starbucks anywhere across the US, you might see a poster in the back room that's talking about an upcoming graduation event. Any of our grads will have a little ASU graduation cap pin on their green apron, so you can look for that as a nice conversation starter. But it's really wonderful to see the ways that we're present throughout Starbucks nationally.
I think, and I'll turn over the questions in a second, I think what amazes me about that is it's actually doing things for good for the community.
Yes.
I mean, it's not motivated by money or financial means for Starbucks. It's how do we give back to the community? And that's really exciting to see. What questions?
I'll add on to that
Oh, yeah.
really quick. It is 100% based on the social impact space of it, but over the course of 12 years, we've of course been looking at the data of how does store performance change? What have the impacts been for Starbucks? What are they most interested in pursuing at ASU? this may or may not surprise you, but if a student is in the SCAP program, they're 2 times as likely to be promoted into leadership roles, which I think speaks a lot to their self-confidence, the applicability of what they're learning in their classrooms and applying it to their real-world positions. They tend to retain longer, which might not be as much of a surprise. If you're getting your degree paid for and that's a goal of yours, of course you're going to retain. But I think that's really important to know. 20% of partners who participate are first-generation college students, which I think is really fantastic. And an innovation that came from the launch of this program to sort of speak to some points made earlier that innovation doesn't happen overnight. And President Crow often challenges us to push the status quo, to continue to remove barriers to higher education. When we launched SCAP, it was originally just for juniors and seniors. The concept was, let's create some sort of a degree completion program for somebody that's already started. This will be the piece that gets them to complete. There were so many partners that raised their hand and said, wait, what about me? I want to be in this program too. And so within a year, the investment had increased substantially to support partners, and the decision was made to roll it out for all 4 years. But there were partners who were applying to ASU and were not meeting our admission requirements. And this was happening frequently enough with this non-traditional population that we were challenged to come up with a pathway to get them in the door to ASU. That was the birthplace of a program called Pathway to Admission, which still exists today. It's had a number of names over the years. But what it does is it provides learners to take a series of 4 to 8 classes, depending on your age and your past academic history. And these are courses that you would typically take in your freshman year. So you've got your algebra, your English, but if you get a C or better in those courses, you'll meet ASU's admission requirements, and then you can apply to the university as a student. We've had over 5,000 SCAP partners enter into SCAP through Pathway to Admission. These are students that not only would not have gotten into ASU, but they would not have gotten into any university based on their past history. And I share that because if you think of the arc of who we are at ASU, you think of our charter where we're removing barriers to access. We have Barrett the Honors College, as you may or may not know. It's considered an gold standard honors college across the U.S. And then you think of the Pathway to Admission student, who is someone who struggled at their first chance at college, but that could have been 10 years ago. They're a different person now. They've entered into SCAP through Pathway to Admission. This year, this May, we will graduate a student who started through Pathway to Admission. She didn't think college was going to be for her. She tried it before, was incredibly nervous to start. She is now graduated from ASU with a 4.0 from Barrett the Honors College. And I think that's such a beautiful arc and is so tied to President Crow's vision for us all. We have to create pathways for opportunity. If somebody raises their hand and say, I want to learn and I want to learn from ASU, how do we make that possible? And it just goes to show that so many people just need the opportunity. So how do we continue to open doors?
Right, wonderful. Questions for Laura? Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any copycats that have occurred with other universities and coming to you from other industries, businesses wanting to create SCAP for their organization with Arizona State.
That's a great question. President Crow would encourage copycats. This was meant to be a model to show how this can be done. And we cannot serve all of the learners that need to complete a bachelor's degree, though President Crow will encourage us to accomplish as many as possible. But there is room for so many universities to work with the big company that's in their city to say, hey, how do we expand pathways of opportunity for your employees? So that challenge is definitely out there. When President Crow speaks about SCAP, he will say, consider this a framework for developing something similar in a way that works for your company and will push forward your goals and meets and aligns with the values of a university partner. We've had a number of companies come to us, and I think all of us across the team speak with potential corporate partners every week about how did the SCAP program come to be, what was the ethos behind it, and they almost always leave saying, wow, I had no idea there were that many people working on this program, or the way that you support them holistically. Because if you think about a university like ASU, it's financial aid, it's the enrollment coaches, it's the success coaching team, it's the career coaching team, it's the people that are looking at our enrollment numbers. It is 1,000% a university effort to help ensure that every partner who comes to us is able to graduate and get a job in an area that they're seeking can succeed. One corporate partner that we have launched a similar program with, under a similar approach, would be Uber. Uber approached us in 2017 and wanted to create a program that would provide their drivers and their delivery partners an opportunity to earn a degree. And if you think of the Uber population at that time, there were a lot of people who were working for Uber that were using it as a transition point, but there were also people who had been driving on the platform since it launched for 5, 6, 7 years. And so they wanted to reward some of their most loyal drivers with an opportunity to pursue a degree program from ASU, but they also worked with our continuing professional education programs and put English language learning in as an opportunity, as well as entrepreneurship. And they had told their partners to say, if we were to do something like this, what might this look like? And those were some of the interest areas that rose to the top. Two things that make that program different, when you think about the learner base you're serving, there were a lot of immigrants that had a degree from a foreign institution and get to the US and feel like there's going to be so much opportunity, only to say, well, your degree isn't from a US-based institution, that doesn't mean anything to us, and so they feel like they're starting over. And so our enrollment coaching team had some really tough conversations with drivers about how do we get you to where you want to be. But they also offered the opportunity for drivers to extend that to a family member, which was really interesting. And now when we look at our graduates, 2/3 are drivers or delivery partners, and about 1/3 of them are family members. But I always thought that was a really unique approach to help expand the impact on their population.
Back there?
Well, I love partnerships and what you did with Starbucks, and I didn't know about the Uber side. Curious, and this is a little crass, but what about, how does the cash flow work? Who pays what, and how much is done for you from a Starbucks perspective?
Yeah, great question. The way that the program is set up, and this is the same with Uber as well, partners do have to fill out a free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, as most students do when they're applying to college. We encourage them to take all of the free aid that is available to them. ASU provides a small scholarship to those learners as a part of our arrangement with Starbucks, and then Starbucks pays the remaining balance. This is all done up front, though it didn't always used to be that way, which is something else from an innovation standpoint that is worth talking about. It used to be set up as a tuition reimbursement model, and that is fantastic for partners who can come up with the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to start. And some of them can, or they can take out loans, or they've got a family member that can loan them the money, but there were so many students who said, that's too risky for me, or I don't have someone in my family that can help get me started, so they just didn't apply. In 2002, we made a change after some pilots with Starbucks in certain markets, where we were running the tuition up front, behind the scenes. It had really helped increase participation. And so when we launched it across the partnership, we saw a spike in applications and so many wonderful emails from partners saying that this is the game changer that is going to allow me to enter this program.
Great.
With regard to the FAFSA, I just red flag there for me for a second. So that application considers student loans to be free aid. Of course, loans aren't free.
It's only the grants that they're
Perfect,
required
thank
to
you.
take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starting to get a
There are
heart
still
palpitation.
students. Yeah. Many of our students will graduate with no student debt. We also cannot stop students from taking out.
Understood,
student
that's a
loan if they
difference.
choose to
Sure,
do so.
thank you.
I know we had a question in the way back. Yep.
Yeah, more of a just for Laura. So like, say my company's interested in setting up a partnership like that. How do we go about doing that? I was thinking about emailing Michael, but maybe there's a more direct approach.
Well, I'm happy to chat with you as well. Would love to hear more about what problem you're trying to solve within your employee base, and thinking creatively about what would be the opportunity that makes the most sense for you. We have so many companies that will come to us and say, I love this idea. This isn't quite what we're seeking to do, but we love the spirit behind it. What can we do that makes sense for us in this moment? So we'd be happy to explore that with you.
I just have a quick piece to that. So ASU is not just a degree granting institution. We have a part of the organization called the Learning Enterprise that focuses on all non-degree credentials. So that is, if you are a local business that is interested in upskilling employees and so on, degrees are not the only way to engage with ASU. There are sort of a whole suite of non-degree credentials. Some are already available, but then there are others that are being developed with corporate governments.
That's great, thank you. So Mike, on to you, a little bit about you. I know you do a lot in terms of corporate engagement, strategic partnerships, and fill us in on what you're doing, and also on the mobile wastewater treatment program that you have going.
Right, so maybe we can go to the next slide. So I work in a central office in the research arm of the University of Texas, called Corporate Engagement and Strategic Partnerships, working with fielding inquiries from companies all day long. And could we go to the next slide? Yeah, great. So vast institution, lots of faculty expertise, lots of resources here. And an example that I wanted to share in innovation is we have a mobile wastewater test bed that we can deliver on site to a partner. So this came about because we have a partner, a corporate partner that needs ultra pure water for its production facility here in the valley. And lots of industries need ultra pure water, food and beverage, semiconductors, healthcare. This is a food and beverage company. And they had a challenge that they brought to us in the way that they treated their wastewater. They took water right out of the tap, but they needed to make it ultra pure for production. And through that treatment process, they were getting 70% yield of ultra pure water, 30% was brine or sludge that was being trucked off site daily, multiple times a day. So they're not getting 100% of the water that they're able to use, and then they have this additional expense of trucking it off site. So they came to our water researchers and presented this challenge. We delivered this mobile unit to their site, and we started analyzing the water, and we were able to look at the brine that was left behind, and out of that brine, capture half of it and make it ultra pure. So delivering half of it back to the facility, so increasing the yield. And what was left behind was the waste that we could compact into solids that could then sit and until it was trucked off later. So it reduced the expense of trucking it off site. So the benefit was twofold: more water that they needed and less waste to get rid of. So this happened because of our relationships with these partners. They were able to share with us this challenge, which I love. Laura just responded to the question: what is the challenge? You're the problem you're trying to solve. That's what we are here to do. So this is just one example of how we take what's happening in our labs and our faculty researchers to solve a need that has impact for the communities that we serve. It ties right back to the charter.
How long did that process take? People tend to think of universities as being very slow. So
Well,
you started working with that company, you solved the problem, what was the duration of the problem?
Yeah, it was a couple years. So it does take some time. We had analysis to do. We had to get, the unit there installed, start testing. But we do move quickly. We do try to move quickly.
I'll add on to that comment because I think that's a great question that oftentimes universities are viewed as moving really slowly.
Yeah.
Manu and some members of the team just got back from the ASU GSB conference, which is a global ed tech conference in San Diego. And I attended that for many years, and someone approached me once and shared a comment that I thought was interesting, and it's just resonated with me. He said, I attend ASU GSB every year. We hear from so many different universities here about the problems that they're seeking to solve and how they're going to solve them, and they talk a lot about it. You're one of the few universities that when I show up next year, the problem you've talked about trying to solve, you're already working on it. You've already started something. You're already doing it. And I think a lot of that is the speed at which we work at ASU. And when you talk about what attracts people to the university, I think it is that speed, that green light, that ability to push and try new things. And if you're gonna fail fast, but learn from it and then try the next thing is really what powers our innovation engine in many ways.
So Micah, and what, you get organizations coming to you saying, help me solve this problem. How do you vet these? How do you, I mean, because it sounds like, yep, we got it, we can figure it out, but there must be some vetting criteria that you use.
Yeah, so there is a team of us in corporate engagement who do the vetting, the initial vetting, and what we try to do through discovery sessions, a couple of discovery sessions usually is learn about the partner, learn about the challenges that they're facing, and then identify the right resources across the university, facilitate a conversation with that researcher or that research center or that faculty member, and look for the opportunities to collaborate. And we do it to provide the researcher and the faculty member, it helps them apply their work, their thinking in real world environments. That helps them. It addresses the public value component of the charter. It also helps our students because now they have access to this production facility. They're there helping with the treatment of the water. They see what the real world of work is like. They learn what is a production facility like. It's not exactly, the way it used to be, when we think about grime and blue collar. So it's a great opportunity all around.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm really interested in the types of problems that organizations are bringing. So I'm thinking you're hearing about wicked problems or type 3 problems, that nature. How is the nature of the problems, how are they changing? And this is for the whole panel. What are you seeing coming to you?
Well, I'll just say, I see a lot of AI-related challenges, a lot of AI-related challenges. And that influences a lot of different industries and different processes within industry. So a lot of AI, and I also, sustainability is a big part of my portfolio. So I see a lot of sustainability challenges about reuse or reduction of materials or alternative materials when resources are limited.
So how does that change, if it does, your approach to innovation? What are you learning from the nature of the problem?
Well, AI, for example, we have a relationship with OpenAI and ChatGPT, which 6 months ago was very different than what it is today, as we all are learning with it. But the initial relationship gave us access to experiment with it, and we had pilot projects all over the institution looking at what's happening, how can it impact our processes. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it's a collaborative approach with the partner, using their tools and their resources and their challenges and applying them to ours in that example.
I can build on that. A lot of our academic units have projects that they do with partners, right? Focused on students. There's a particular unit called the Luminosity Lab at ASU, where it's a group of students who are working really with industry partners in solving problems. It's a multidisciplinary group of students, and they're focused on whatever the challenges that the company has that is being brought to them. So this is the way the institution is learning as well, right? In that instance, in the Luminosity Lab, we are learning through our students who are trying to solve these problems with our partners. And almost every college, or not almost, all colleges have these relationships with local partners. So yeah, I think it's a collaborative, everybody learning together all the time.
I have a follow-up question with a little bit of a preamble, so forgive me. I spent a lot of years in higher education and still have post-academic stress disorder. I think it's hard for people who aren't familiar with the way work is normally structured on a campus, any campus, to understand what, Manu, I think you spoke to as one of the primary innovations that is powering everything else, and that's this middle layer of connective tissue that you have people throughout the university who are leading these conversations, asking these questions, exploring opportunities, because typically you have the administration, it's a silo of silos problem, right? You have the administration, maybe the Center for Teaching and Learning is trying to get faculty pedagogy at some level, but there's nobody else who's really reaching across units and departments and schools and things of that nature. And it leads to the just inability to solve those kinds of problems. Somebody comes to, I was at Berkeley for 12 years before coming here. Somebody would come to us and say, can we do this? And well, I don't know, and I don't even know who to ask, right? So can you and maybe anybody speak to that specific piece? Because this is the human practices innovation. You actually have people leading these conversations, answering the phone, but then knowing who to talk to. They're not faculty. They're not typical university staff, the success teams and the enrollment teams and things. So can you flesh that out a little bit more? Tell us about these folks.
So ASU has what we call a corporate engagement, strategic partnerships, and economic development team. So that's where Mike sits. Our job is, that's our charge, is to be able, that's what we are hired for, to be that front door to the university. So we understand that especially ASU is a maze. It is, you could be lost in ASU trying to find the right person, the right researcher for weeks, months before you find the right person. And that's where we're here to make those connections and find the right department you need to be at. Even if we don't know the answer, we go to experts like the panelists that we have here that can help guide us to get you to the right place so you're not the person sending a million emails, making a million calls. We say, thank you so much, we have our discovery calls, and then we go about our jobs is to find the right connection point for you. And that's also very unique at a university to have a department that's solely charged with that. Now, ASU does have side doors you can enter, as do all universities, and that's where sometimes you might hear stories of people getting lost, but they just really do need to find that front door, which is a special designated team at ASU.
And because we're all rooted in the charter, when we reach
Yeah.
out to find a connection, the other end is always receptive. This is the third university that I've worked at. It is unbelievable to me when I reach out to, a researcher or scientist that I don't know, but somebody said, or I saw it on their website, that they respond affirmatively. They want to talk to
Right?
the contacts that are reaching out to us.
Yeah.
If I can just, look at this from a slightly wider lens.
Yeah.
The example that they're talking about is structure, right? To do what we are able to do, we need leadership, structure, and culture. And leadership, not just from the person at the top or the team at the top, but a leadership from across the institution. Our deans need to be committed to be able to do this, such that the faculty and staff in their units can do this. Non-academic unit leaders need to do this. Then you set up the supporting structures. Understand what functions need to exist in an institution that traditionally didn't do these kinds of things. Hire foreign staff within these structures. And then there is the culture, right? That you're not going to get into trouble if you talk to an industry partner without checking for permission first. Or you're not going to get into trouble if you reach across the institution to another unit and say, hey, we now have a water problem. Do you have water people over there, whatever the thing is, right? So it is really leadership, structure, and culture woven together in meaningful ways, and then the center of gravity becomes the charter. There's something that anchors all of the activities that are happening around this. That's what holds it together.
And an absence of policing of boundaries, protectionism. Everybody has egos. But it sounds like there's a set of conversations that transcend that, which is very special.
I think we have the opposite problem of that. We don't know what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So we often land up in places, situations where we are surprised to find other ASU colleagues. So that may be now our next problem to solve, is that everybody is entrepreneurial, trying to solve problems. We sometimes don't know that other parts of the university are in the same space.
If only there was an AI knowledge graph.
Thank you for your question.
Yes, thanks, Bill. I've been enjoying this immensely, and the water sparked something for me. How can ASU be a force multiplier for innovation that is happening within the community that's outside of the university? And I want to bring one to your attention. There's a company here in town that is addressing what's known as APIs in wastewater.